Hi, my name is Will. I am the manager here at Tonoloway Farm in Highland County, Virginia, part of the Allegheny Mountains. We are a forest food farm. We grow shiitake mushrooms, garlic, we have a chestnut orchard, some other fruits, but we primarily focus on maple syrup and walnut syrup, and our specialty is walnut syrup. So we tap about 1,600 walnut trees currently, and we're about to tap one today. We're here in this riparian zone right next to a creek that flows into the Chesapeake Bay. And so part of what we do on this farm is try to take care of our watershed areas. And so we've planted a bunch of trees here, and instead of removing any trees in this area, we try to utilize them to the best of our abilities. And one thing we can do is tap them. And so we've got a nice big walnut tree here that we're going to tap. And first thing I do before I tap a walnut tree is to make sure it is a walnut tree and not something like a locust, which sometimes can have a very similar texture in the bark. It's easy to distinguish once you look up at the canopy and see that the buds and the twigs and branches are thick and is very distinct from a locust. The next thing I do is I look for the holes from the prior tapping season, because when you tap, scar tissue forms around that hole, and you're not going to get into the sapwood for the sap to flow for the next year. So I go 3 inches to the left or right, or 12 inches above or below the prior year's holes. And I look for a nice little valley in between the thick bark of the tree. You don't want to tap into thick bark because you're not going to get the depth you're looking for, and the tap will get caught up on the bark. So I find a nice little valley, and once you've tapped a tree for several years, sometimes it can be hard to find a good spot to tap a tree because you're avoiding the last year's holes and you're looking for a valley. But so on a tree like this, it's never been tapped before, so I'm not really worried about last year's tap hole, so I can go anywhere I want. This tree is big enough that I can probably get 3 taps in it. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to find a good spot, and we're going to drill a hole and put the tap in. So I've found a little valley here on the walnut tree between the bark that I have determined to be a really good spot to drill a hole. And because of the thickness of this tree, I'm going to go about 2 inches, and so I've gauged 2 inches on my drill bit so I know when to stop, and so we are ready to proceed. So now that I've got the hole drilled, I'm just going to put the tap in and tap it until it's seated properly. Immediately to tapping the tap in, the best advice I've gotten is it's called tapping. So we use 5/16 taps with 3/16 tubing here, and we have found anecdotally that it just has improved our sap flow using the 5/16 taps as well as the 3/16 tubing. We also have a sugar bush that has 5/16 tubing, and that performs well when we have a vacuum pump attached to it. The 3/16 line really does well without vacuum on natural vacuum, but the 5/16 really needs to have that mechanical vacuum added to it. So we are transitioning to 3/16 everywhere. So we're here in the sugar shack with the evaporator, and it's the same evaporator we use for maple syrup. And when it comes to walnut, we have the major distinction is that we have to deal with pectin in the sap. And so what happens is while you're boiling the walnut sap, there is a gelatinous gooey substance called pectin that just has to be filtered out. And so we pull off the syrup before it's syrup at about 60 bricks, pour it through a filter to get the pectin out, and then we take it to the finishing pan to finish. And so that is a distinction that we have from the maple syrup process, is the filtering of pectin out of the walnut syrup to make it a viable product. And then we have walnut syrup.